The silence woke her. Not the soft stirring of morning birds or the distant clatter of servants beginning their work, but a thick, pressing silence that felt like a hand against her chest. Maren opened her eyes to unfamiliar darkness, her body rigid beneath sheets that smelled of lavender and something sharper, cedar perhaps, or pine. Her fingers curled instinctively, finding fabric so fine it seemed to dissolve against her skin. She was not in the cramped room she had shared with the housekeeper's daughter after her father cast her out. She was somewhere vast and cold and terrifyingly unknown. Memory returned in fragments. The church, the vows spoken in voices that echoed against stone, the weight of a ring sliding onto her finger, placed there by hands that never trembled, never hesitated, never once looked at her with anything resembling warmth. She was married. Maren sat up slowly, the canopy above her materializing in the gray pre-dawn light, a towering construction of deep blue velvet and silver thread. The bed stretched endlessly in both directions, large enough for 6 people, perhaps more. And beside her, the pillow lay smooth and untouched. The sheets on the left side of the bed were perfectly arranged, military precise, showing no evidence that another body had ever disturbed them. Her husband had not come to her. The Duke of Ashworth, Hadrian Vance, had married her yesterday afternoon in a ceremony attended by exactly 7 people. He had spoken his vows with the same tone one might use to order a horse reshod. He had placed his ring on her finger without meeting her eyes. And then he had deposited her in this cavernous room, wished her a formal good evening, and vanished. Maren pressed her palms against her face, breathing through the sharp ache in her chest. She should be relieved. She had dreaded the wedding night with a terror that had kept her sleepless for weeks. The thought of a stranger's hands on her body, a stranger's weight pressing her into unfamiliar sheets, had made her physically ill on the carriage ride to Dunmore Hall. But this absence felt worse somehow, this complete dismissal, as if she were a ledger entry to be filed away and forgotten, a duty discharged. She slipped from the bed, her bare feet meeting cold marble that sent shivers up her legs. The nightgown she wore was not her own. Silk and lace, probably worth more than everything she had owned in her previous life combined. Someone had dressed her in borrowed finery for a wedding night that never happened. The room revealed itself gradually as her eyes adjusted. Massive windows draped in heavy curtains, a fireplace large enough to stand in, the embers long dead. Furniture that gleamed with the patient shine of wood, polished daily for generations, and everywhere, the Vance family crest, a raven clutching a sword, embroidered into cushions, carved into bedposts, worked into the very fabric of this place she was supposed to call home. Voices drifted through the door. Low, careful, the kind of whispers that knew they were doing something forbidden. Maren moved closer, pressing her ear to the carved oak. Said she was the other one, the unwanted one. Poor substitute, if you ask me. Lady Cassia was the beauty. Everyone knows he was supposed to marry Lady Cassia. Well, Lady Cassia is dead now, isn't she? Fever took her 6 months after Lord Tobias fell, so his grace got stuck with the spare. Laughter, quickly stifled. Shh, she might hear you. Let her hear. What's she going to do? Everyone knows he only married her because of Lord Tobias. Deathbed promise, they say. Swore he would protect the Calloway sisters, and since the pretty one died, he got left with. Footsteps approached, and the voices scattered like startled birds. Maren stood frozen, her hand still raised toward the door, her pulse spiking with a violence that frightened her. The unwanted one. The spare. She had heard such words before, whispered in the corners of her father's house, hissed by her stepmother when no one else could hear. But hearing them here, in her husband's home, on the first morning of her marriage, felt like a blade sliding between her ribs. The door opened without warning. Marin stumbled backward, nearly losing her footing on the cold marble. The man who entered was not her husband. He was younger, perhaps 20, with the same dark hair and sharp features as Hadrian, but softer, somehow, more open. He wore riding clothes and carried the smell of horses and morning air. "Oh," he said, stopping short. "You're awake. I didn't think you would be up so early. I'm Corwin, Hadrian's brother." He bowed slightly, the gesture more awkward than formal. "I suppose that makes us family now." "Of a sort." Marin clutched the neckline of her borrowed nightgown, acutely aware of how little it covered. "I should dress. If you'll excuse me." Of course. But he didn't leave immediately. His eyes, she noticed, held none of the coldness she had seen in Hadrian's. They were curious, perhaps even kind. "I just wanted to say, before everyone else gets to you, welcome to Dunmore Hall. I know it doesn't feel like much of a welcome. Hadrian isn't exactly warm, but he's not cruel either. Give him time." Before she could respond, he was gone, the door clicking shut behind him. Marin sank onto the edge of the bed, her legs no longer trustworthy. Give him time, as if this were a temporary affliction, as if her husband's indifference might thaw with patience and proximity. She knew better. She had spent 19 years learning exactly how much patience and proximity were worth to people who had already decided you were worthless. The door opened again, and this time Marin did not bother to stand. Hadrian Vance entered like a storm contained in human form. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in black as if perpetually attending a funeral. His dark hair was swept back from a face that would have been handsome if not for the severe set of his jaw and the flatness in his eyes. Those eyes swept over her once, cataloging her presence the way one might note a new piece of furniture. "You're awake," he said. Not a greeting, an observation. Your brother said the same thing. Corwin talks too much. He moved to the window, pulling back the curtain to let pale morning light flood the room. "I trust you slept well." The bed is very large. A muscle twitched in his expression. Guilt, perhaps, or discomfort. It vanished before she could name it. "I thought it best to give you time to adjust. This situation is unconventional." Unconventional? Marin heard herself laugh, a sharp sound that surprised them both. "Is that what we're calling it?" He turned to face her fully, and for the first time, she saw a crack in his composure, a tightening around his eyes that suggested he was not as unaffected as he wished to appear. "I made a promise to your brother. As he lay dying in my arms, Tobias asked me to protect his sisters, to ensure you were provided for, kept safe, given the life you deserved." The words struck her like blows. Tobias. Her brother. The golden one. The only person in her family who had ever looked at her without disappointment or disdain. "And this is your solution," she said quietly. "Marriage. Your sister Cassia was my original intention, but when she died..." He stopped, his jaw working. "You were the only one left. Your father had cast you out. You had no fortune, no prospects, and no protection. Marriage was the most effective way to fulfill my promise. The most effective way. Not the kindest, not the most desired, the most effective. So I am a problem you have efficiently solved. You are my wife." His voice hardened. "You will want for nothing. You will have a home, servants, security, everything a woman in your position could desire. In return, I ask only that you conduct yourself appropriately and do not expect more than I can give." The silence stretched between them, sharp as broken glass. "And what exactly can you not give?" Marin asked, though she already knew the answer. "Affection. Romance. The sort of marriage my brother is no doubt hoping I will develop." His eyes met hers, and in their depths, she saw something she did not expect. Pain. Old and calcified, buried so deep it had become part of his foundation. I'm not capable of such things. I made that clear to your brother before he died. He accepted those terms. I trust you will as well. Marin rose slowly, drawing herself up to her full height, which was still nearly a head shorter than him. She should be grateful. She should bow her head and accept her fortune. She had gone from homeless disgrace to duchess in the space of a single day. But something in his dismissal, his calm assumption that she would simply accept whatever scraps he offered, ignited a spark of defiance she had thought her father had beaten out of her years ago. I have conditions, she said. His eyebrow rose. Conditions? You've made your terms clear. Now, I'll make mine. She kept her voice steady, though her heart threatened to crack her ribs. First, I want access to Tobias's belongings, his letters, his personal effects, whatever remains. He was my brother, and I deserve to have something of his. A muscle twitched in Hadrian's jaw. Done. Second, I want to be permitted correspondence with my mother. She is not responsible for my father's cruelty, and I will not be cut off from her entirely. Reasonable. What else? Marin swallowed. This was the condition that mattered, the one that would determine whether she survived this marriage with her sanity intact. Third, when 1 year has passed, if we find this arrangement unbearable, I want the right to leave quietly. No scandal. No drama. A small cottage somewhere far away. Enough income to live modestly, and freedom. I won't be trapped in a loveless house forever, Your Grace. I've already lived that life once. The silence that followed was so complete, she could hear her own heartbeat. You're asking me for an escape route, he said finally, before we've even begun. I'm asking for honesty. You've told me what this marriage is. I'm telling you what I require to survive it. Hadrian studied her for a long moment. His expression altered, a flicker of what might have been respect, or perhaps just surprise that she had any spine at all. 1 year, he said slowly. And if at the end of that year, you still wish to leave, then you let me go, quietly, without interference. And if I don't wish to let you go? The question caught her off guard. She stared at him, searching for mockery or manipulation, finding neither. Then I suppose we'll have a problem, Your Grace. Another long pause. Then Hadrian extended his hand. You have my word. All 3 conditions. Do we have an agreement? Marin looked at his outstretched hand. Large, capable, scarred across the knuckles, in a way that spoke of violence she could not imagine. The hand of a man who had held her brother as he died. She took it. His grip was warm and firm and utterly impersonal. We have an agreement. He released her hand and moved toward the door, but paused at the threshold. Breakfast is served at 8. My sister Linnea will meet you in the morning room and help you navigate the household. His voice softened almost imperceptibly. She has been looking forward to your arrival. Try not to disappoint her. The door closed behind him, and Marin stood alone in the vast, cold room, her hand still tingling from his touch. 1 year. She had 1 year to endure this beautiful prison. She just had to survive until then. The morning room was drenched in sunlight, golden and warm, in a way that felt almost aggressive after the cold formality of her chambers. Marin paused in the doorway, momentarily blinded, until a bright voice cut through the glare. You're here! Oh, finally, you're here! A young woman launched herself from a settee by the window with the energy of a cannon blast. She was perhaps 18, dark-haired like her brothers, but with wide brown eyes that sparkled with barely contained excitement. She grabbed Marin's hands before anyone could make a proper introduction and squeezed them with fierce enthusiasm. I'm Linnea. I know Hadrian probably didn't mention me at all, because he has the emotional range of a wardrobe, but I've been absolutely dying to meet you. I've been the only woman in this house for 3 years since Father passed, and the loneliness has been driving me utterly mad. Marin blinked. It's lovely to meet you. Lovely? How formal. No, we're going to be friends. Sisters, actually. Isn't that wonderful? I've always wanted a sister. Linnea pulled her toward the settee, gesturing for a maid to bring tea. Sit. Eat. You must be starving. Hadrian never remembers that normal people require sustenance. A tray appeared, laden with more food than Marin had seen in months, pastries still steaming from the oven, fresh fruit glistening with morning dew. Eggs prepared 3 different ways, meats, cheeses, breads, and jams in colors she couldn't name. I'm not. I couldn't possibly. Nonsense. You're thin as a rail. What have they been feeding you? Linnea began piling a plate without waiting for an answer. Corwin said he met you this morning. I scolded him terribly for intruding before you'd even dressed. He means well, but he has no sense of propriety. Marin accepted the plate, overwhelmed by both the food and the company. In her previous life, meals had been silent affairs, taken in the kitchen with the servants, after her stepmother had banished her from the family table. The chatter, the warmth, the assumption that she belonged here. It felt like wearing someone else's skin. How are you finding Dunmore Hall? Linnea asked, settling beside her with her own cup of tea. Overwhelming, I imagine. It took me years to stop getting lost in the East Wing. It's very grand. It's very old, is what it is. And cold. And full of ghosts, if you believe the maids. Linnea's eyes sparkled. I don't, of course, but I do enjoy pretending I hear mysterious footsteps when I want them to leave me alone. Despite everything, Marin felt her lips twitch toward a smile. Does that work? Brilliantly. They think I'm half mad already, so it fits. Linnea sipped her tea, studying Marin over the rim. Can I ask you something terribly personal? You may ask. I may not answer. Fair enough. Linnea set down her cup. What was Tobias like? At home, I mean. We only knew him from his visits here, and those were always so formal. Official. I always wondered what he was like when he was just himself. The question knocked the breath from Marin's lungs. She set down her fork, appetite vanishing. He was kind, she said finally, the words scraping past the tightness in her throat. The only one who was kind. When my father married my stepmother, and she decided I was inconvenient, Tobias was the only one who still spoke to me, who still saw me as family. Linnea's expression softened, with something that looked dangerously close to pity. He used to bring me books, Marin continued, the memories spilling out against her will. Hide them under my pillow, so my stepmother wouldn't find them. He said I was too clever to waste away in ignorance, even if Father disagreed. He sounds wonderful. He was, Marin's voice cracked, and now he's gone, and I'm here, married to a man who looks at me and sees nothing but an obligation. Linnea reached over and took her hand. Hadrian is complicated. He wasn't always like this. Before the war, before Tobias, he was different. Warmer. He used to laugh. I know that seems impossible now, but he did. What happened? The question hung in the air. Linnea glanced toward the door, as if checking for eavesdroppers. He blames himself. For Tobias. For everything. She lowered her voice. They were on a reconnaissance mission together. Enemy territory. Something went wrong. Hadrian made it back. Tobias didn't. Her fingers tightened around Marin's. My brother carried Tobias's body for 3 miles through hostile ground, rather than leave him behind. By the time he reached our lines, he hadn't slept in 4 days. He collapsed and didn't wake for nearly a week. Marin's chest constricted. The image of Hadrian, younger perhaps, dragging her brother's lifeless form through mud and blood and chaos. It was almost too much to hold. He's never forgiven himself, Linnea continued. And marrying you, I think he sees it as penance, a way to honor a promise he feels he failed. So I'm his punishment? No. Linnea's grip turned fierce. You're his chance, even if he doesn't know it yet. A footman appeared in the doorway before Marin could reply. Lady Vance, Her Grace the Dowager requests, miss. That is, Her Grace the new Duchess's presence in the blue drawing room. Linnea's expression flickered with something that might have been concern. Already? She usually doesn't summon anyone before noon. The Dowager Duchess was most insistent, my lady. Marin rose, her barely touched breakfast abandoned. The Dowager Duchess, your grandmother. Hadrian's grandmother. Mine too, technically. Linnea stood, smoothing her skirts. She's formidable. Don't show fear. She can smell it. That's comforting. I'll come with you. For moral support. But the footman shook his head. The Dowager requested Her Grace alone, my lady. Linnea squeezed Marin's hand one final time. Remember, she's more bark than bite. Usually. Sometimes. Just don't cry in front of her. She finds it tedious. Marin followed the footman through corridors that seemed designed to intimidate, past portraits of stern-faced ancestors and marble busts that watched her with cold disapproval. Each step felt like walking toward an execution. The blue drawing room was smaller than she expected, but no less overwhelming. Every surface gleamed with silk and silver. The walls were papered in French damask, and in a chair by the fire, positioned like a throne, sat a woman who looked as though she had been carved from ice. The Dowager Duchess of Ashworth was perhaps 70, with silver hair swept back from a face that might once have been beautiful, but had long since hardened into something more formidable. Her black dress was severe, her posture impossibly straight, her pale blue eyes fixed on Marin with the focused intensity of a hawk spotting prey. So, she said, her voice crisp as frost, this is the girl my grandson has married. Marin curtsied, grateful for the years of instruction her mother had given her before the family had splintered apart. Your Grace, it is an honor to meet you. Is it? The Dowager's lips curved in something that was not quite a smile. Sit down, girl. My neck aches from looking up. Marin sat in the indicated chair, folding her hands in her lap to hide their trembling. I received word of this marriage exactly 4 days before it occurred, the Dowager continued. 4 days to prepare for a duchess I had never met, from a family I had barely heard of, who apparently had been living in disgrace before my grandson decided to play savior. I have not asked you to speak. The words cracked like a whip. I am speaking. You are listening. That is how this works. Marin closed her mouth. I have made inquiries about you, Lady Vance. The title dripped from the Dowager's lips like acid. Your father is a minor baron of no particular distinction. Your mother was his first wife, who died when you were young. His second wife found you troublesome and convinced him to cast you out. You have spent the last 2 years living off charity, working as a companion to an elderly widow who recently died, leaving you with nothing. She paused. Have I missed anything? Marin's face burned, but she kept her voice steady. No, Your Grace. That summary is accurate. Good. Then we understand each other. The Dowager leaned forward slightly. You are a nobody, a penniless girl from a broken family, with no connections, no fortune, and no accomplishments worth mentioning. My grandson has married you for reasons I can only describe as sentimental foolishness, and society will eat you alive the moment you set foot in London. I have no intention of setting foot in London. The Dowager's eyebrow rose. No? I understand my place, Your Grace. I am here to satisfy a promise made to my dying brother. Nothing more." The older woman studied her with renewed interest. "You're not as stupid as I expected." I'm not sure how to take that. As a compliment, stupidity would make this situation considerably more tedious. The dowager rose and moved to the window, her movements stiff but dignified. "My grandson is broken, Lady Vance. Not physically, though the war took its toll there as well. But here." She tapped her chest. "Tobias Calloway was his closest friend, his only true friend, I sometimes think. When Tobias died, something in Hadrian died with him." Marin's voice caught in her throat. "Linnea said he blames himself." "Blames himself?" The dowager laughed, a brittle sound. "He has constructed an entire cathedral of guilt and locked himself inside it. He believes he should have died that day, that he failed Tobias by surviving. That's not rational. Grief rarely is." The dowager turned back to face her. "Which brings me to my warning, girl. You are now part of this family, whether I approve or not. My grandson made vows before God, and I will not see them broken. But if you hurt him, if you take advantage of his guilt, if you give him any reason to regret this impulsive act of honor." She crossed the room with surprising speed, stopping directly in front of Marin's chair. "I will make your life so miserable you will wish you had remained in whatever gutter my grandson plucked you from. Do we understand each other?" Marin met the dowager's eyes without flinching. "Perfectly, Your Grace." "Good." The older woman's expression transformed, something almost like approval flickering in her gaze. "There may be steel in you after all. We shall see." The letter haunted her. For 3 days, Marin tried to push the dowager's words from her mind. She focused on learning the household routines, on navigating the labyrinthine corridors of Dunmore Hall, on surviving the endless parade of servants who curtsied and called her Your Grace, with varying degrees of sincerity. Linnea was her constant companion, a bright spark of warmth in the cold grandeur. They took walks in the gardens, where Linnea pointed out the rose bushes her mother had planted, and the bench where Hadrian used to read as a boy. They explored the library, a vast cathedral of books that Marin fell in love with instantly. They even attempted embroidery together, which ended in disaster and helpless laughter. But always, beneath the surface, the question burned. What had Tobias written? She saw Hadrian rarely and briefly. He appeared at dinner, seated at the far end of a table long enough to host a small army, making stilted conversation about weather and estate business. He acknowledged her with formal courtesy when they passed in hallways. He made no attempt at private conversation. But she noticed things. The way his hand tightened on his wineglass when someone mentioned the war. The shadow that crossed his face when Linnea spoke of their mother. The exhaustion that hung beneath his carefully maintained composure, visible only in the moments when he thought no one was watching. On the 4th day, she decided to stop wondering. The study was in the East Wing, a room she had been told was Hadrian's private domain, off-limits to everyone except the most trusted servants. She waited until she saw him leave for his morning ride. A ritual Corwin had mentioned happened every day without fail. Then she went hunting. The door was unlocked, which surprised her. Perhaps he trusted the household's fear of him more than any physical barrier. The room beyond was smaller than she expected, lined with books and maps and military commendations mounted in frames. A massive desk dominated the space, its surface covered with neat stacks of correspondence. And there, on the corner of the desk, a small wooden box with a brass lock. Marin's blood rushed through her veins as she approached. This was wrong, a violation of whatever fragile peace they had established. If he caught her here. But Tobias had been her brother, her only ally in a family that had cast her out. If he had written something in his final moments, she had a right to know. She tried the lock. It held firm. Of course. She examined the box more closely, searching for a weakness, a hidden latch, anything that might give her access. Looking for something? She spun so fast she nearly knocked the box to the floor. Hadrian stood in the doorway, still in his riding clothes, his dark hair windswept, his expression carved from stone. His gaze moved from her face to the box and back again, and something dangerous flickered in their depths. Marin's mouth went dry. I can explain. By all means. He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him with a soft click that sounded like a death knell. Explain why my wife is attempting to break into my private correspondence on her 4th day in my house. Your grandmother told me about the letter. Whatever response he had expected, it was not that. His composure cracked, just for an instant, revealing something raw and wounded beneath. She had no right. Perhaps not. But she did. And now need to know. Marin forced herself to meet his eyes. Tobias was my brother. If he wrote something before he died, I deserve to see it. You deserve. The words came out flat, cold. You deserve nothing. You're here because of my guilt, my promise, my failure. Don't presume that gives you any claim to things that don't concern you. How can you say it doesn't concern me? The anger that had been building for days finally broke through her caution. He was my family, the only one who cared whether I lived or died. I spent 3 years mourning him with nothing but memories, and now you tell me he wrote something. Something you've kept locked away, and I'm not supposed to care. You don't understand. Then help me understand. The silence between them crackled with tension. Hadrian stood very still, his hands clenched at his sides, his jaw tight with the effort of maintaining control. You want to know what the letter says? His voice was quiet now, dangerous. Fine, I'll tell you. He moved to the desk, pulling a key from inside his waistcoat. The lock opened with a soft click. Inside the box lay a single folded paper, its edges worn from repeated handling. He wrote this the night before our mission. He knew something might go wrong. He knew. Hadrian's voice fractured. He knew he might not come back. He handed her the letter with the care one might use with something sacred or explosive. Marin unfolded it with trembling fingers. The handwriting was achingly familiar. She had read Tobias's letters so many times. She knew the slant of his script better than her own. But these words were meant for someone else. Hadrian, if you're reading this, then I was right to worry. Don't blame yourself. That's an order from your commanding officer and your friend, and I expect you to follow it. I know what you're like. I know you'll tear yourself apart looking for something you could have done differently. I know you'll carry my body back, even if it kills you, because that's the kind of stubborn, honorable fool you are. But listen to me carefully. Some things cannot be prevented. Some losses cannot be avoided. And my death, if it comes, will not be your fault. I have one request. My sisters. You know about my father, about what kind of man he is. If anything happens to me, Cassia and Marin will have no one. Father will marry Cassia off to whichever fortune hunter offers the most. And Marin... God, Marin has already suffered so much. She was cast out because she dared to have opinions, Hadrian. Because she refused to be silent and obedient and invisible. Promise me you'll protect them, whatever it takes. They deserve better than the hand they've been dealt. You're the best friend I've ever had, the best man I know. Don't let my death convince you otherwise. Tobias, the tears came before Marin could stop them. They fell onto the paper, blurring the ink, and she had to set the letter down before she destroyed it entirely. He defended me. The words emerged as a ragged whisper. Even at the end, he defended me. He loved you. Hadrian's voice was rough. He talked about you constantly, about how clever you were, how brave, how it infuriated him that your father couldn't see your worth. Marin looked up, vision swimming. Then why did you never tell me? Why keep this locked away? Because I failed him. The confession ripped from Hadrian like a wound finally lanced. I made the promise. I swore to protect both of you, and Kezia still died. She caught fever while I was still recovering from my injuries, and by the time I learned of it, she was already gone. He turned away, shoulders rigid. I couldn't protect her. I couldn't save Tobias. And now you're here, the last piece of him left in this world, and every time I look at you, I see everything I've lost. Everything I've failed. Marin stood slowly. Her legs felt unsteady, her chest ached, but something had changed between them. Something important. You didn't fail him. You don't know that. I know he loved you. She moved closer, stopping just behind him. I know he trusted you enough to write that letter, to believe you would keep your word. I have kept my word. I married you. I've given you everything you could need. Everything except yourself. He turned, and they were suddenly much closer than either had intended. She could see the shadows under his eyes now, the fine lines of strain around his mouth. He looked exhausted. He looked haunted. He looked like a man who had been drowning for a very long time. I have nothing to give, he said quietly. I told you that. Tobias didn't believe that. He called you the best man he knew. Tobias saw what he wanted to see. Maybe. Marin held his gaze. Or maybe you've spent so long punishing yourself that you've forgotten what you actually are. The silence stretched between them, charged with something neither could name. Hadrian's eyes searched her face, looking for something. Judgment, perhaps. Or absolution. She wasn't sure which. Your father was wrong about you, he said finally. Tobias was right. You are brave, perhaps foolishly so. Is that a compliment? It's an observation. The ghost of something that might have been a smile flickered at the corner of his mouth. You broke into my study. Most people in this house won't even enter without written permission. I'm your wife. I assumed certain privileges applied. Apparently. He retrieved the letter from where she had set it down, folding it carefully back into its worn creases. This stays in the box, but you may read it again, if you wish, whenever you need to. It was a small concession, but it felt like the first brick removed from the wall between them. Thank you, Marin said. Don't thank me yet. He returned the letter to the box and locked it. My grandmother invited guests for dinner tomorrow evening. Old family friends. She wishes to introduce you to society. I thought I wasn't ready for society. You're not. But she's decided you require trial by fire. His expression darkened. There will also be a Lady Vivian Ashby in attendance. She has expectations regarding my future that this marriage has complicated. You mean she expected to marry you? She and my grandmother have been planning it for years. Hadrian met her eyes. She will not be pleased to meet you, and she is considerably less subtle than my grandmother in expressing displeasure. Marin absorbed this new information, adding it to the growing list of obstacles she would need to navigate. Any advice? Don't show weakness. Don't apologize for existing. And whatever you do, his jaw tightened. Don't let her see that you care what she thinks. That's easy, Marin said quietly. I've had years of practice pretending not to care. A change passed through Hadrian's expression. Recognition, perhaps, or understanding. Tomorrow at 7, he said, moving toward the door. Linnea will help you prepare. And Marin. She looked up at the sound of her name, her actual name, not Lady Vance or my wife, or any of the formal titles he had used until now. Tobias was right about something else, Hadrian said. You do deserve better than the hand you've been dealt. I'm sorry I can't give you that. He left before she could respond. Marin stood alone in his study, surrounded by the evidence of his grief, and felt the first crack forming in the walls she had built around her heart. Tomorrow would bring new battles, but tonight, something had changed between them, something that could not be unchanged. The morning of the dinner party arrived wrapped in gray clouds and the distant rumble of thunder. Maren stood at her window, watching the sky darken, feeling as though the weather had decided to match her mood. "Stop brooding and come here," Linnea called from behind her. "We have exactly 9 hours to transform you into someone who can survive my grandmother's guests, and you're wasting time staring at clouds." Maren turned to find the room had been invaded. 3 maids stood at attention near the wardrobe, which had been thrown open to reveal a cascade of silk and satin she did not recognize. A woman she had never seen before was arranging an array of cosmetics on the vanity with the precision of a general preparing for battle. And Linnea herself was perched on the edge of the bed, practically vibrating with energy. Where did all of this come from? Hadrian had it commissioned weeks ago, before the wedding. Linnea hopped off the bed and began rifling through the gowns. He may be emotionally stunted, but he does understand the importance of proper armor. And tonight, you will need armor. The hours that followed blurred into a whirlwind of fabric and consultation. The woman at the vanity, introduced as Madame Fontaine, turned out to be a modiste of some renown who had traveled from London specifically for this purpose. She circled Maren with measuring tape and critical eyes, muttering in French about bone structure and coloring. "The midnight blue," she declared finally, pulling a gown from the wardrobe. "It will make her eyes dramatic, memorable. She needs to be memorable." The dress was stunning. Deep blue silk that shifted to black in certain lights, with delicate silver embroidery along the bodice and hem. It was elegant without being ostentatious, sophisticated without trying too hard, the kind of dress that whispered rather than shouted. "It's beautiful," Maren breathed, running her fingers along the fabric. "It's strategy," Linnea corrected. "Lady Vivian will be wearing something bright and bold, because she always does. She wants to be the center of attention. You need to be the opposite. Quiet elegance. Let her shine, and then outshine her without appearing to try. You've thought about this a great deal. I've been watching Vivian operate for years. I know her tactics." Linnea's expression hardened. She's been circling Hadrian since before the war. She sees him as her rightful property, and she will not take kindly to being displaced by someone she considers beneath her. Maren absorbed this as Madame Fontaine began the process of fitting and pinning. The corset was tighter than anything she had worn before. The layers of petticoats felt like armor indeed, weighing her down, constricting her movement. "Tell me about the other guests," she said, partly to distract herself from the discomfort. Linnea settled into a chair, counting on her fingers. "Lord and Lady Pemberton are harmless, old friends of grandmother's. They'll be polite and vague and forget your name by dessert. Sir Marcus Thorne is a military man, served with Hadrian during the war. He's actually decent. Might even be an ally if you can get him talking about horses. And then there's Lady Vivian and her mother, the Countess of Ashby." Linnea's voice cooled. "The Countess is worse than Vivian in some ways. More subtle. She won't attack you directly. She'll simply make observations that sound like compliments, but are actually designed to expose every weakness you have. Wonderful. The key is to never let them see you react. Whatever they say, however they try to provoke you, maintain perfect composure. Smile. Deflect. Change the subject." Linnea leaned forward. "And whatever you do, don't let them catch you alone. Vivian is most dangerous when there are no witnesses." The fitting continued through the afternoon. Maren's hair was washed and dried, and arranged in an elaborate style that left her neck feeling exposed. Cosmetics were applied with subtle precision, enhancing rather than transforming. By the time Madame Fontaine declared her finished, the woman in the mirror was almost unrecognizable. You look like a duchess, Linnea said softly. I look like a stranger. Good. Strangers are harder to dismiss. Linnea squeezed her hand. You can do this, Marin. I know you can. A knock at the door interrupted them. One of the maids answered, then turned with wide eyes. His Grace wishes to see her Grace, in the library, before dinner. Linnea and Marin exchanged glances. That's unusual, Linnea murmured. He never summons anyone before events. He's usually hiding in his study until the last possible moment. Marin smoothed her skirts, checking her reflection one final time. Then I suppose I should go see what he wants. The walk to the library felt longer than it had before. Perhaps it was the weight of the dress. Perhaps it was the knowledge of what awaited her tonight. Perhaps it was simply the growing awareness that something between her and Hadrian had shifted since their confrontation in his study, and she was not yet certain what that shift meant. He was standing by the fireplace when she entered, dressed in formal evening wear that made him look even more severe than usual. Black coat, black waistcoat, white cravat tied with military precision. His dark hair had been tamed into something approaching civilized, though a single strand had already escaped to fall across his forehead. He turned at her entrance, and something passed through his gaze. Surprise, perhaps, or appreciation. It vanished before she could name it. You look. He paused, searching for the word. Prepared. Linnea has been thorough. She usually is. He moved to his desk, retrieving a small velvet box. I wanted to give you this before the others arrive. He held it out to her, and Marin took it with cautious hands. Inside, nestled against dark silk, lay a necklace of sapphires and diamonds that caught the firelight and scattered it into 1,000 tiny stars. It belonged to my mother, Hadrian said quietly. She wore it on her wedding day, and at every important event thereafter. Grandmother has been keeping it safe, waiting for... He stopped. Waiting. Marin felt words lodge in her chest. I can't accept this. You're my wife. It belongs to you now. He took the necklace from the box and moved behind her. May I? She nodded, unable to speak. His fingers brushed against her neck as he fastened the clasp, and she felt the touch like lightning along her spine. The sapphires settled against her collarbone, cool and heavy and impossibly beautiful. There. His voice was rough. Now you look like a Duchess of Ashworth. Marin turned to face him, acutely aware of how close they stood. Why are you doing this? Doing what? Being kind, giving me your mother's jewelry, warning me about Lady Vivian. She searched his face. Yesterday, you said you had nothing to give. Tonight you're arming me for battle. The air between them transformed, that crack in his composure that she had glimpsed before, widening just slightly. Because tonight, you represent this family, and whatever my personal failings, I will not let them tear you apart. His jaw tightened. Vivienne is cruel. She enjoys destroying people. I've seen her reduce grown women to tears with a single sentence. And you think I can't handle cruelty? I think you've handled more than your share already. His gray eyes held hers with unexpected intensity. I'm asking you to handle a little more. Just for tonight. The grandfather clock in the corner began to chime. 7 strikes, each one pulling them closer to the moment of truth. We should go, Hadrian said, offering his arm. They'll be arriving soon. Marin placed her hand on his sleeve, feeling the strength beneath the fabric. One question first. Yes? If Lady Vivian is so terrible, why does your grandmother continue to invite her? The corner of his mouth twitched in something that was almost, but not quite, a smile. Because my grandmother believes suffering builds character, and she's been trying to build mine for 32 years. Despite everything, Marin laughed. Hadrian looked at her with something approaching wonder, as if the sound had surprised him, as if he had forgotten such sounds existed. Ready? He asked. No, she admitted. But I'm going anyway. That's the spirit. She hadn't time to reply before the first guests began arriving, and they were swept into the current of the evening. The drawing room had been transformed. Candles blazed from every surface, casting warm light across silk-papered walls and gilded furniture. Fresh flowers perfumed the air with something sweet and heavy. Servants moved with silent efficiency, ensuring every crystal glass gleamed and every cushion sat at the precise angle. And at the center of it all, the Dowager Duchess held court. She was dressed in black as always, but tonight her severity had a theatrical quality. Jet beads glittered at her throat. Her silver hair was arranged in an elaborate style that added inches to her already imposing height. She looked, Marin thought, like a spider who had spent considerable effort decorating her web. "Ah, there you are." The Dowager's eyes swept over Marin with cool assessment. "The Ashworth sapphires. I wondered if Hadrian would remember them." "They're beautiful, Your Grace. They're historic. 4 generations of duchesses have worn them. Try not to lose any of the stones." The butler's voice interrupted from the doorway. "Lord and Lady Pemberton, Your Grace." The Pembertons were exactly as Linnea had described, elderly, vague, pleasant, in the way of people who had long since stopped paying attention to anything beyond their immediate comfort. They greeted Marin with polite confusion, seemed to forget her name twice during their brief conversation, and then wandered off to examine the refreshments. Sir Marcus Thorne arrived next. He was younger than Marin expected, perhaps 40, with the weathered complexion of a man who spent more time outdoors than in. His handshake was firm, his smile genuine. "So you're the one who finally caught Hadrian," he said, his voice carrying a warmth that suggested real affection. "I told him years ago he needed someone to shake him out of his gloom. He didn't listen, of course, he never does." "We've known each other only a short time," Marin said carefully. "Doesn't matter. I knew my wife for exactly 3 weeks before I proposed, and we've been happy for 15 years. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Don't let Vivian rattle you. She's all performance. Underneath, she's terrified of becoming irrelevant." Her question died on her lips as the butler's voice rang out again. "The Countess of Ashby, and Lady Vivian Ashby." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Lady Vivian entered like a flame. Red silk gown, cut daringly low, fitted to display every curve to maximum advantage. Golden hair arranged in an elaborate cascade of curls. Rubies glittering at her throat, her ears, her wrists. She was beautiful in the way of a perfectly crafted weapon, designed to wound. Behind her, the Countess moved with quieter menace. Silver-haired, sharp-featured, dressed in deep purple that somehow conveyed both elegance and disapproval simultaneously. Her eyes found Marin immediately and performed an assessment so thorough it felt like being searched. "Your Grace," Vivian said, sweeping toward the Dowager with practiced grace. "How wonderful to see you, and looking so well. One would never guess you'd been feeling poorly." "I haven't been feeling poorly." "Oh? I heard you'd taken to your rooms for several days. Naturally, I was concerned." Vivian's smile was honey over poison. "But I see the rumors were exaggerated." Her gaze slid to Marin with the lazy precision of a cat-spotting movement. "And this must be the new Duchess. We've heard so much about you." "Have you?" Marin kept her voice pleasant. "How kind." "Oh yes. The whole county has been buzzing with curiosity." Vivienne moved closer, examining her with open scrutiny. The mysterious bride who appeared from nowhere. Such a romantic story. I wasn't aware romance was involved. Wasn't it? A duke rescuing a destitute young woman from poverty and disgrace? It sounds positively like something from a novel. Vivienne's smile sharpened. Though I suppose the reality is somewhat less poetic. Marin felt Hadrian move to her side, a solid presence at her shoulder. "Lady Vivian, how unexpected to see you." "Unexpected," Vivian's laugh was musical and entirely false. Your grandmother invited us weeks ago. Didn't she tell you? It must have slipped my mind. How unlike you. You're usually so attentive to details. Her eyes flickered between them. Though I suppose you've been distracted lately. All those wedding preparations must have been exhausting. The wedding was quite simple, Marin said. Your Grace preferred efficiency over spectacle. Annoyance crossed Vivian's face at having her barb deflected so easily. How? Practical. Though I must say, I was surprised not to receive an invitation. Hadrian and I have been friends for so many years. I would have thought he'd want his closest companions present for such an important occasion. It was a private ceremony, Hadrian said flatly. Family only. And yet your bride's family wasn't in attendance either, from what I understand. Vivian tilted her head, all innocence. In fact, I heard her father wasn't even informed until after the fact. How very unconventional. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Marin felt eyes turning toward them. The Pembertons, pausing mid-conversation. Sir Marcus, watching with narrowed eyes. The Countess of Ashby, observing with the satisfaction of someone whose trap had sprung successfully. My relationship with my father is none of your concern, Marin said, her voice steady despite the racing of her pulse. Of course not. I'm simply curious. Vivian's smile never wavered. One hears such interesting stories about the Calloway family, the estrangement, the scandal, the years of living in reduced circumstances. She pronounced the last words as though describing something distasteful she had stepped in. Vivian. The dowager's voice cracked across the room like a whip. I believe dinner is about to be announced. Perhaps you could save your curiosity for the second course. For a moment, something ugly flickered in Vivian's eyes. Then the mask slid back into place. Of course, Your Grace. Forgive me. I was simply trying to make conversation. She swept toward the dining room, her mother gliding behind her like a shadow. Sir Marcus appeared at Marin's elbow. Well handled, he murmured. She was testing your defenses. You didn't give her anything. She'll try again. Undoubtedly. But now she knows you won't crumble at the first assault. He offered his arm. May I escort you in? I have a feeling this dinner is going to be a battle, and I'd rather be on your side. Marin glanced at Hadrian, who nodded almost imperceptibly. Thank you, Sir Marcus. I would appreciate that. As they walked toward the dining room, Marin felt the weight of what lay ahead settling onto her shoulders. This was only the beginning. The real trial was yet to come. And somewhere behind her, she could feel Vivian's gaze burning into her back like a brand. Dinner was a masterwork of barely concealed hostility. The table stretched the length of the formal dining room, laden with crystal and silver, and enough food to feed a small village. Marin found herself seated near the center, with Sir Marcus on her left and Lady Pemberton on her right. Hadrian sat at the head of the table, too far away to offer support, but close enough that she could feel his attention tracking her throughout the meal. Vivienne, naturally, had positioned herself directly across from Marin, close enough to strike, far enough to appear innocent. The first course passed without incident. Soup, delicate and forgettable, consumed with the appropriate murmurs of appreciation. Lady Pemberton prattled about her gardens. Sir Marcus shared an amusing anecdote about a horse that had escaped its stable and been found in the village bakery. But Marin could feel Vivian watching, waiting. The attack came with the fish course. Tell me, Lady Vance, Vivian said, her voice pitched to carry down the table. How are you finding the adjustment to your new position? It must be quite overwhelming, coming from such a different background. Every new situation requires adjustment, Marin replied. I'm sure you remember your own debut season, the challenges of learning society's expectations. Oh, but I was born to this world. I had the advantage of proper preparation. Vivian smiled sweetly. You've had to learn everything from scratch, haven't you? The rules of precedence, the correct forms of address, which fork to use when... She gestured vaguely at the array of silverware surrounding Marin's plate. My mother was quite thorough in my education. Was she? How fortunate. Though I understand she was rather limited in her resources after your father remarried. It must have been difficult, watching your sister receive all the advantages while you were... Vivian paused delicately. Set aside. The table had gone quiet. Even Lady Pemberton had stopped her chatter, sensing blood in the water. My sister and I had different paths, Marin said. That's hardly unusual in large families. No, but it is unusual for one sister to be welcomed and the other to be cast out entirely. Vivienne leaned forward, all false concern. I only mention it because people will talk, you know. They'll want to know why your father rejected you so completely, what you did to deserve such treatment. Vivienne. Sir Marcus's voice was sharp. That's quite enough. I'm only trying to help. The Duchess will face these questions eventually. Better she practice her answers now, among friends. Vivienne's eyes glittered. Unless, of course, there's something she'd rather keep hidden. Marin set down her fork with deliberate calm. The crystal sang softly against the china. Every eye at the table was fixed on her now. The dowager watched with hooded eyes. The Countess of Ashby wore a small, satisfied smile. And Hadrian was rising from his chair. Lady Vivian. His voice cut through the tension like a blade. I wonder if you might explain something to me. Vivian blinked, momentarily thrown by his intervention. Your Grace? You've spent the past 10 minutes interrogating my wife about her family circumstances. He moved down the length of the table, his footsteps deliberate on the polished floor. I'm curious what you hope to accomplish. I meant no offense. I was simply making conversation. Were you? Because it sounded remarkably like an attempt to humiliate her in front of our guests. He stopped behind Marin's chair, his hand coming to rest on the back of it. Which would be not only rude, but remarkably foolish, given that insulting my wife is the same as insulting me. The room had gone utterly silent. Vivienne's composure finally cracked. Color rose in her cheeks, and her fingers tightened around her wine glass. Hadrian, surely you can't expect me to simply accept this situation without question. We had an understanding. Everyone knew that eventually. We had nothing of the sort. His voice was ice. You had expectations. I never encouraged them. Your grandmother, my grandmother does not choose my wife. I do. His hand moved from the chair to Marin's shoulder, the touch light, but unmistakable. And I have chosen. If you cannot accept that, perhaps you should reconsider your presence at my table. The silence stretched, suffocating. Then the dowager spoke, her voice cutting through the tension with surgical precision. I believe it's time for the ladies to withdraw. Marin, you will accompany me to the drawing room. Vivienne, you and your mother may take your leave. I find myself suddenly fatigued. It was a dismissal, a brutal, unambiguous dismissal. The Countess of Ashby rose, her face pale with fury. Your Grace, surely you don't mean... I mean exactly what I said. Good evening. What followed was the most excruciatingly polite expulsion Marin had ever witnessed. The Ashbys gathered their dignity and their wraps with the stiff movements of people who knew they had been outmaneuvered. Vivienne paused at the doorway, her eyes finding Marin with a hatred so pure it was almost beautiful. This isn't finished, she said quietly, the words meant for Marin alone. Then she was gone. The remaining guests made hasty excuses shortly thereafter. Sir Marcus squeezed Marin's hand on his way out and murmured that she had done splendidly. The Pembertons tottered off in confused silence, already forgetting what they had witnessed. And then it was just Marin and Hadrian, and the dowager, standing in the wreckage of the evening. Well, the dowager said, That was dramatic. Grandmother, don't. You handled it correctly, though your timing could have been better. Intervening before the main course would have allowed us to salvage the evening. She turned to Marin, her expression unreadable. You held your composure under fire. I'm impressed. I didn't do anything. Exactly. You gave her nothing. No tears, no anger, no wounded protests. That infuriated her more than any response could have. The Dowager's lips curved in something approaching approval. There may be hope for you yet. She swept from the room, leaving Marin and Hadrian alone, amid the guttering candles and the remnants of disaster. I'm sorry, Marin said quietly. For what? For causing a scene, for provoking her, for— You didn't provoke anything. Hadrian turned to face her, and in the candlelight, his expression was almost gentle. Vivienne has been spoiling for that confrontation since she learned of our marriage. It was inevitable. You defended me. You're my wife. You said that before, when we made our agreement. Marin searched his face. But this was different. You were angry. I was furious. The admission seemed to surprise him as much as it did her. She was trying to hurt you, publicly, deliberately, and I couldn't. He stopped, his hands clenching at his sides. I won't allow it. Whatever else this marriage is or isn't, you are under my protection. Anyone who tries to harm you will answer to me. Marin felt something stir deep in her chest, a crack in the defenses she had built over years of rejection and disappointment. She should shore them up, should remember that this was temporary, conditional, a year-long agreement that would end with her walking away. But standing here, with the sapphires warm against her throat and his eyes holding something that looked dangerously like care, she found she didn't want to. You're different than I expected, she whispered. So are you. They stood there for a long moment, neither moving, neither speaking. The candles flickered. The great house creaked around them. And somewhere in the darkness beyond the windows, rain began to fall. You should rest, Hadrian said finally. Tonight was exhausting. Yes, I suppose it was. He offered his arm to escort her to the stairs. They walked in silence through the empty corridors, their footsteps echoing on the marble floors. At the door to her chambers, he paused. Marin. Yes? He seemed to struggle with something. His hand rose, almost touched her cheek, then dropped back to his side. You were magnificent tonight, he said. Tobias would have been proud. Before she could respond, he was gone, his footsteps retreating down the darkened hallway. Marin stood alone at her door, her hand pressed against the sapphires at her throat, and wondered when exactly this arrangement had started to feel like something else entirely. Something she was beginning to fear she might not want to escape. The weeks that followed transformed Dunmore Hall into something Marin had not expected. It began with small things. Hadrian appearing at breakfast instead of eating alone in his study, his hand finding the small of her back as they walked. The way he sought her out in the library each afternoon, settling into a chair near hers with a book he rarely read. They talked. About everything and nothing, about the estate and its tenants, whose names Hadrian knew by heart, whose children's birthdays he remembered, whose ailments he tracked with surprising care, about Linnea's upcoming debut season and Corwin's disastrous attempts at courtship, about books they loved and music they couldn't stand, and whether the cook's tendency to oversalt the soup was deliberate sabotage or genuine incompetence. They talked about Tobias. It happened gradually, in fragments. A memory shared over dinner. An anecdote triggered by passing through a particular room. Hadrian spoke of their years at school together, of the scrapes they had gotten into, of the dreams they had shared about the future. Marin spoke of the brother she had known at home, gentle and fierce by turns, the only one who had seen her as worthy of attention. He used to write to me, she said one evening as they sat in the library, rain streaking the windows. Even after Father cast me out, he would find ways to send letters through the servants. Money, too, when he could spare it. He never told me that. He wouldn't have. Tobias hated asking for help, and he hated admitting when he couldn't fix something himself. Maren smiled sadly. He was trying to convince Father to take me back. Right until the end, he was trying. Hadrian was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. He talked about you constantly, those last months. About how wrong it was that you'd been treated so badly. About how he was going to make it right once the war was over. And then the war took him instead. Yes. The single word carried the weight of everything he couldn't say. Maren reached across the space between their chairs and took his hand. He stiffened at first, as he always did when touched unexpectedly. Then, slowly, his fingers curled around hers. They sat like that until the fire burned low, neither speaking, neither pulling away. Other moments accumulated. Riding lessons, because Hadrian declared that a Duchess of Ashworth could not be seen afraid of horses. Maren proved to be a terrible student, graceless and nervous, but he was patient in a way she had not expected. When she finally managed to trot without clutching the saddle in terror, his smile was so genuine, it stole her breath. Evening walks through the gardens, where autumn was painting the leaves in shades of gold and crimson. They wandered past the rose bushes his mother had planted, past the bench where he had read as a boy, past the small cemetery at the edge of the grounds, where generations of vances lay beneath weathered stones. "My mother is buried here," Hadrian said, stopping before a grave marked with a simple marble angel. "She died when I was 7. I barely remember her face, but I remember her voice. She used to sing to me when I couldn't sleep." Maren stood beside him, feeling the weight of his grief like a physical presence. What did she sing? Old ballads, mostly. Songs about love and loss and ships that never came home. His voice softened. "I haven't been able to listen to music since Tobias died. It reminds me too much of everything I've lost." Without thinking, Maren began to hum, a simple melody, something her own mother had sung to her in childhood. She couldn't remember all the words, but the tune came back as naturally as breathing. Hadrian went very still. When she finished, he was looking at her with an expression she couldn't read. Something raw and vulnerable and desperately controlled. "Don't stop," he said quietly. "Please." So she sang another song, and then another, her voice thin but steady in the autumn air. And when she finally fell silent, Hadrian's hand found hers again, his grip almost painful in its intensity. "Thank you," he whispered. I had forgotten. I had forgotten there was still music in the world." The intimacy between them deepened in ways neither acknowledged aloud. Hadrian began appearing at her door each evening to escort her to dinner, a formality that somehow became essential. He noticed when she was tired and quietly arranged for her afternoon obligations to be reduced. He remembered that she preferred honey in her tea and despised anything flavored with anise. And Maren noticed things about him, the way exhaustion shadowed his eyes when Parliament was in session, the tension in his shoulders after difficult meetings with estate managers, the nightmares that sometimes drove him to pace the hallways at hours when the rest of the house slept. She found him one night in the library, 3 a.m, staring into a fire that had nearly died. "You should be asleep," she said from the doorway. He didn't turn. "So should you." I heard footsteps. She moved into the room, pulling her dressing gown tighter against the chill. The same dream? He had never spoken of the dreams directly, but she had pieced together enough from his haunted mornings and Linnea's worried glances. "It's always the same," he said finally. "We're on that ridge again. The enemy line is advancing. I'm shouting orders, but no one can hear me. And then..." His hand clenched on the arm of his chair. "And then Tobias falls. And I can't reach him. I can never reach him. Marin crossed to stand beside his chair. It wasn't your fault. Everyone says that. It doesn't make it true. Tobias said it too. She knelt beside him, forcing him to meet her eyes. In his letter, he ordered you not to blame yourself. Are you going to disobey a direct command from your superior officer? A flicker of humor crossed his features, buried under layers of grief. He outranked me by exactly 2 weeks. He never let me forget it. Then honor his rank. Stop punishing yourself for surviving. The words hung between them, bold and dangerous. Marin half expected him to withdraw, to rebuild the walls she had been slowly dismantling. Instead, he reached out and touched her face. His fingers were gentle, tracing the line of her cheekbone with something approaching wonder. As if he couldn't quite believe she was real, as if he was afraid she might dissolve at any moment. You make me want to try, he said quietly. To stop hiding behind duty and guilt and distance. You make me want to feel something again. Hadrian, I know. He pulled his hand back. I know this wasn't the arrangement. I know I promised you nothing but security. But? He looked at her, and in his eyes, she saw something she had never expected to find. Hope. Fragile and frightened, but unmistakably present. But I find I don't want you to leave, in a year or ever. His voice dropped. And I don't know what to do with that. Marin's chest tightened with emotion. This was the moment she should be practical. Should remind them both of the terms they had agreed to. Should protect herself from the devastation that would surely come if she let herself feel too much. Instead, she rose and pressed a kiss to his forehead. We have time, she whispered. We don't have to decide anything tonight. She left before she could say more, before she could confess that she was already in far deeper than she had ever intended to fall. Behind her, Hadrian sat motionless in the dying firelight, his fingers touching the place where her lips had been. The winter ball at Dunmore Hall was Linnea's idea. You've been hiding here for months, she declared one morning over breakfast. Both of you. It's time you showed society that this marriage is real, and that Vivian's little tantrum at dinner hasn't affected you at all. Hadrian looked pained. I don't see why that requires a ball. Because balls are how society communicates. You absolute disaster of a brother. A successful event will silence the rumors and establish Marin's position once and for all. Linnea turned to Marin with sparkling eyes. And because I've been desperate for an excuse to dance for months, and you're going to give me one. The preparations consumed the household for weeks. Invitations were sent. Flowers were ordered from London. The ballroom, unused since Hadrian's father's death, was aired and polished until it gleamed like new. Marin found herself swept up in the chaos. Fittings for a new gown, a confection of silver silk that Linnea swore would make her look like starlight, consultations with the cook about menus, endless discussions about seating arrangements and musical selections, and which guests should absolutely not be placed near each other. Through it all, Hadrian watched her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Something had shifted between them since that night in the library. They hadn't spoken of it directly, but the air around them felt charged now, full of possibility. His hand lingered when he helped her from carriages. His eyes followed her across crowded rooms. And more than once, she caught him looking at her lips, with an expression that made her forget how to breathe. The night of the ball arrived cold and clear, stars glittering like ice crystals against the black velvet sky. Marin stood before her mirror as Alice fastened the final buttons of her gown and arranged the Ashworth sapphires at her throat. You look like a queen, Linnea breathed from the doorway. I look terrified. Same thing, really. Queens are always terrified. They just hide it better. Linnea swept into the room in a gown of pale blue, her dark hair elaborately curled. Hadrian is waiting. He's been pacing the entrance hall for 20 minutes. I think he's nervous. Hadrian doesn't get nervous. Hadrian has never had a wife to show off before. Come on, let's not keep him waiting any longer. He was standing at the foot of the grand staircase when she descended, dressed in formal black and white, his dark hair gleaming in the candlelight. His eyes found her immediately, tracking her progress down each step with an intensity that felt like a physical touch. When she reached the bottom, he offered his hand without speaking. You look. He stopped, swallowed. There aren't words. Linnea said I look like starlight. Linnea understated. His thumb traced a circle on her gloved palm. You look like you were made to be here, like this house was waiting for you all along. Before she could answer, the first guests began arriving, and they were swept into the current of the evening. The ball was a triumph. Maren moved through the glittering crowd with growing confidence, greeting guests, making conversation, accepting compliments on the decorations and the music and the champagne. She danced with Sir Marcus, who told her everyone was talking about how well she had handled Vivienne. She danced with Lord Pemberton, who forgot her name twice and stepped on her feet 3 times. She danced with Corwin, who made her laugh by providing outrageous commentary on everyone in the room. But always she was aware of Hadrian, watching her from across the ballroom, tracking her movements, waiting. When the orchestra struck up a waltz, he appeared at her side as if summoned. Dance with me. It wasn't a question. She took his hand, and he led her onto the floor. They had danced before, perfunctory turns around the room at the handful of events they had attended since their marriage. But this was different. His hand at her waist felt possessive. His gaze never left hers. They moved together with an ease that surprised her, as if their bodies had been practicing for this moment all along. Everyone is watching, she murmured. Let them. They'll talk. They're already talking. They might as well have something worth discussing. He pulled her slightly closer, pushing the boundaries of propriety. I want them to see. See what? That you're mine. The words sent heat cascading through her chest. Hadrian, I know what we agreed. I know the terms. But I find I don't care about terms anymore. His voice dropped, rough and urgent. I care about you. God help me, Maren. I have tried to maintain distance. I have tried to honor our arrangement. But every time I look at you, I forget why I'm supposed to be careful. The music swelled around them. Other couples spun past, oblivious to the world reshaping itself in the center of the floor. This wasn't supposed to happen, Maren whispered. No, it wasn't. His hand tightened at her waist. But it has, and I'm tired of pretending otherwise. The waltz ended. They stood together in the sudden silence, neither willing to break the connection. Come with me, Hadrian said. He led her from the ballroom, through the crush of guests, past the servants carrying champagne, out onto the terrace, where cold air hit her heated skin like a blessing. The garden stretched below them, silvered with frost, the winter stars blazing overhead. They were alone here, invisible to the crowd inside. Maren. He turned her to face him, his hands cupping her shoulders. I have to say this, even if it ruins everything, even if you leave at the end of the year and never look back. Say it. I love you. The confession ripped from him like a wound finally lanced. I love your courage and your kindness, and the way you sing when you think no one can hear. I love that you fight back when people try to diminish you. I love that you sat with me at 3 a.m. and told me to stop punishing myself. His voice cracked. I love you, and I know I promised you freedom, but I don't know how to let you go. Tears spilled down Maren's cheeks, hot against the cold air. You impossible man, she breathed. I have been trying so hard not to love you. Have you succeeded? No. She laughed through her tears. No, I have failed spectacularly. His hand found her face, wiping the tears with a gentleness that broke her heart. "Tell me," he said. "Please. I need to hear it." "I love you." The words came easier than she expected. "I love you, Hadrian Vance, Duke of Ashworth, stubborn, broken, beautiful man. I love you, and I don't want to leave. I don't want freedom, if freedom means a life without you." He kissed her. Not gentle, not tentative. This was a kiss of claiming, of surrender, of two people who had finally stopped fighting the inevitable. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her against him, her hands fisted in his coat. The cold air forgotten, the party forgotten, everything forgotten except this moment. When they finally broke apart, breathless and trembling, he rested his forehead against hers. "No more escape routes," he said. "No more one-year agreements. No more distance. No more pretending." "No more pretending," she agreed. He kissed her again, softer this time, a promise rather than a claim. Behind them, the ballroom glittered with light and music, but out here, in the frost-touched garden, a different kind of celebration was beginning. One that would last far longer than a single evening. The happiness lasted exactly 11 days. 11 days of stolen kisses in empty corridors. 11 days of tangled hands beneath dinner tables. 11 days of falling asleep in each other's arms and waking to find the world still impossibly, beautifully intact. Maren had never known such joy. She had never allowed herself to imagine it possible. Which is why, when the blow came, it destroyed her completely. It began with a letter. She found it in Hadrian's study, where she had gone to retrieve a book she had left behind. The letter lay open on his desk, weighted down by a paperweight, clearly abandoned in haste. She would not have read it, would have respected his privacy, except that her own name caught her eye. Regarding the matter of Lady Vance's agreement, cold dread pooled in her stomach. She picked up the letter. It was from Hadrian's solicitor. Formal, precise, detailing the legal provisions Hadrian had apparently requested. A settlement to be established in Maren's name. A cottage to be purchased in the northern counties. An income sufficient for comfortable independence. Everything she had asked for. Everything required for her escape. Dated 3 days ago. After the ball. After the confession. After everything. Maren read the letter twice, her hands shaking so badly the paper rattled. He had kept his promise. Even after declaring his love, even after she had declared hers, he had continued preparing for her departure. As if he didn't believe her. As if he expected her to change her mind and leave him after all. As if this had all been some elaborate test she was destined to fail. The door opened behind her. "Maren, I was looking for you." Linnea said. Hadrian stopped. Seeing what she held, his face went pale. "That isn't what it looks like." "It looks like you're preparing for me to leave." "The solicitor sent it before the ball. I instructed him weeks ago when we first made our agreement. I forgot to cancel the commission until yesterday, and by then, he had already completed the documents." He moved toward her, hands outstretched. "I never intended for you to see that. It means nothing now." "Nothing?" Maren's voice cracked. "You told me you loved me. You asked me to abandon our agreement. And the entire time, you were still making arrangements for my departure? I didn't think, what? That I would find out? That I would see proof that some part of you still expects this to end?" She threw the letter onto the desk. "You don't trust me. You never did." "That's not true." "Then why keep this from me? Why not tell me you had changed the terms with your solicitor?" She backed away as he advanced. "Unless you weren't certain you wanted to change them at all. Maren, please, I have spent my entire life being told I wasn't wanted." The words tore from her, ragged and raw. "By my father. By my stepmother. By every person who should have loved me and didn't. You were supposed to be different. You said you loved me. And now I find out that you were hedging your bets the entire time. I wasn't. Did you ever actually believe I would stay?" She was crying now, tears streaming down her face. "Or was this all just duty to you? A more elaborate version of the promise you made to Tobias?" The words hit him like a physical blow. She saw him flinch, saw pain flash across his features. "Don't say that," he said quietly. "You know that's not true." "I don't know anything anymore." Footsteps in the hallway. The dowager's voice, sharp with concern. "What is happening here?" The servants said they heard shouting. Marin turned, blindly pushing past the older woman, ignoring Linnea's startled cry from somewhere behind her. She ran through corridors that blurred with tears, upstairs that seemed endless, until she reached her chambers and slammed the door against the world. She didn't sleep that night. She sat by the window, watching the stars wheel overhead, replaying every moment of the past months, every kind word, every gentle touch, every promise that suddenly seemed hollow. Had any of it been real? Or had she simply been so desperate for love that she had invented it? By morning, her decision was made. She packed quietly, taking only what she had brought with her. The borrowed dresses, the beautiful gowns, the Ashworth sapphires, all remained in their places. She left the Byron book of poetry on her pillow, unable to bear the reminder. The letter she wrote was brief. "Hadrian, I release you from your promise to Tobias. Whatever duty you felt has been discharged. Please do not search for me." Marin slipped from the house before dawn, when only the kitchen servants were stirring. A carriage was easy enough to arrange. Money was harder. But she had enough for a ticket on the public coach, and pride enough to refuse anything that came from him. As the carriage pulled away from Dunmore Hall, Marin allowed herself one last look at the great house, silhouetted against the gray winter sky. Somewhere inside, the man she loved was sleeping, unaware that she was leaving. Or perhaps he had expected this all along. Perhaps that was the cruelest truth of all. She turned away and did not look back. The boarding house in Whitcomb was clean, affordable, and utterly soulless. Marin took a room on the 3rd floor, barely large enough for a narrow bed and a single chair. She told the landlady she was a widow. The lie came easily, requiring no elaborate backstory, explaining both her mourning clothes and her solitude. For 3 days, she did nothing but exist. She slept. She stared at walls. She ate when the landlady insisted, though everything tasted like ash. On the 4th day, her mother found her. How Helena Calloway had tracked her to this anonymous corner of an anonymous town, Marin never learned. But suddenly, there she was, standing in the doorway of the cramped room, her traveling cloak still damp with rain. Marin. The sound of her name, spoken in that familiar voice, shattered the numbness completely. She fell into her mother's arms and wept. Helena held her through all of it. The sobs that racked her body. The incoherent attempts to explain what had happened. The fresh waves of grief that came whenever she thought she had finally emptied herself of tears. When the storm finally passed, her mother smoothed her hair back from her face with gentle fingers. "Tell me everything," Helena said, "from the beginning." So Marin told her. The marriage of duty, the slow transformation, the confession at the ball, the letter from the solicitor, the terror that she had been fooled again, had trusted where she shouldn't, had given her heart to someone who was only keeping it out of obligation. Helena listened without interruption. When Marin finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Do you remember," she said finally, "when your father first began to change? When your stepmother started poisoning him against you?" Marin nodded, her voice too broken to speak. "You came to me. You were 11 years old. You asked me why people stopped loving each other. And I told you that sometimes love isn't the problem. Sometimes fear is. I don't understand. Your father loved you. He still does. though he's too proud and too broken to admit it. But he was afraid. Afraid of your stepmother's displeasure. Afraid of conflict. Afraid of being alone again after I was gone. Helena cupped her daughter's face. Fear makes people do terrible things. It makes them hurt the ones they love most, because hurting them feels safer than losing them. You think Hadrian was afraid? I think a man who lost his closest friend, who carries guilt like a stone around his neck, who has spent years convincing himself he doesn't deserve happiness, might be terrified of believing it could actually last. Helena's eyes were gentle. You said he prepared for your departure, even after confessing his love. But did you ever consider that he might have done so, not because he expected you to leave, but because he was terrified you might? Marin stared at her mother as the words rearranged themselves in her mind. He told me he didn't know how to let me go, she whispered, and then he made preparations that would ensure you could leave comfortably whenever you chose, because giving you the option to leave was less frightening than believing you might stay. Helena smiled sadly. It's backwards logic. The logic of a wounded heart. But it makes a terrible kind of sense when you've been hurt badly enough. I ran. I left without giving him a chance to explain. Yes, I did exactly what he was afraid of. Yes. Marin clutched the letter to her chest, overcome. Oh God, what have I done? What people do when they're wounded. What your father did. What Hadrian did. Helena pulled her hands away. The question is what you do now. Do you keep running? Or do you go back and fight for what you actually want? What if he won't forgive me? Then at least you'll know. And knowing is always better than wondering. The rain continued to fall outside the grimy window. Marin thought of the library at Dunmore Hall, the garden where she had sung for him, the terrace where he had kissed her under stars that seemed to shine for them alone. I have to go back, she said. Yes, her mother agreed. You do. He may turn me away. He may. But I don't think he will. How can you be so sure? Helena smiled, the same smile Marin remembered from childhood, full of wisdom and warmth. Because a man who prepares for your departure while begging you to stay is a man who loves you more than he knows how to say. And that kind of love doesn't disappear in a few days. Marin embraced her mother fiercely. Thank you. Go. Fix this. And then bring that husband of yours to visit me properly. I want to meet the man who managed to capture my daughter's heart. Despite everything, Marin laughed. She was on a coach to Dunmore by nightfall. The great house rose against the evening sky like a fortress. Marin stood at the gates, her traveling dress mud-spattered, and her hair escaping its pins, her heart pounding with a violence that made breathing difficult. She had rehearsed speeches during the entire journey. Explanations, apologies, declarations. All of them had evaporated the moment she saw the house. What if he wouldn't see her? What if he had already moved on, retreated back behind his walls of duty and distance? What if she had destroyed everything beyond repair? The gatekeeper recognized her. His eyebrows rose, but he said nothing, simply swinging the gates open and letting her pass. The walk up the drive felt endless. Each step brought her closer to judgment, to reckoning, to the moment when she would discover whether there was anything left to salvage. The front door opened before she reached it. Linnea stood on the threshold, her face tear-stained, her expression flickering between fury and relief. You idiot, she said. You absolute, complete, utter idiot. Then she ran forward and embraced Marin so fiercely that Bones protested. I thought you were gone forever. I thought I'd never see you again. Hadrian has been destroying himself since you left. He hasn't slept, hasn't eaten, and hasn't done anything except search for you. Linnea pulled back, gripping her shoulders. How could you just leave like that? Without a word? Without explanation? I was wrong. I was scared. And I was wrong. And I need to tell him he's not here. Marin's stomach dropped. What? He left 2 days ago. He said he was going to find you, no matter how long it took. Linnea's voice cracked. He gave the solicitor instructions for transferring the entire estate to Corwin if he didn't return within 6 months. He was prepared to give up everything. Where did he go? Everywhere. Your family home first, but your father turned him away. Then every town between here and London. He's been riding through the night, barely stopping to rest. Linnea's eyes shone with fresh tears. He loves you, Marin. I've never seen him like this. He's desperate. The sound of hoofbeats shattered the twilight quiet before she could answer. A horse appeared at the end of the drive, galloping hard, its rider hunched low over its neck. Marin recognized the set of those shoulders, the dark hair streaming in the wind, before she could make out his face. Hadrian saw her at the same moment. He reined the horse so sharply it reared, and then he was off its back and running toward her, with a desperation that stole her breath. Marin. Her name was a prayer, a plea, a sob torn from the depths of him. He stopped just short of touching her, his hands raised as if afraid she might disappear. You came back. I never should have left. No. You were right to go. I should have told you about the solicitor. I should have trusted you enough to explain. I was afraid, and I let that fear. I know. She stepped closer, closing the distance between them. I know why you did it, and I'm sorry I didn't give you a chance to tell me. You're sorry? His voice cracked. I nearly lost you. I spent 3 days believing I would never see you again. I have been riding through every village between here and London, terrified that you had vanished from my life forever, and you're apologizing to me? We both made mistakes. My mistakes were greater. It's not a competition. Something broke in his expression. A sound escaped him, half laugh, half sob, and then his arms were around her, crushing her against his chest, his face buried in her hair. Don't leave me again, he whispered. Please, God, don't ever leave me again. I won't. She clung to him with equal desperation. I promise. No more running. No more escape routes. No more fear. He pulled back enough to look at her face, his hands cradling her head like something precious. I love you. I love you more than I have ever loved anything, and I will spend the rest of my life proving it, if you'll let me. I don't need you to prove anything. She reached up to touch his face, tracing the lines of exhaustion, the evidence of days without sleep. I just need you to stay. Then stay with me. His voice dropped, urgent and raw. Not because of duty, not because of promises made to the dead. Stay because you choose to. Because you want to. Because this is where you belong. I belong with you, Marin said. Wherever that is, whatever it looks like, that's where I want to be. The kiss that followed was salt-stained and desperate, a collision of relief and joy, and the overwhelming gratitude of people who had nearly lost everything. Behind them, Linnea made a sound that was half cheer, half sob. The servants had gathered in the doorway, pretending not to watch, and somewhere in the shadows, the Dowager Duchess stood with her arms crossed and the smallest possible smile on her stern face. Well, she said, her voice carrying across the drive. I suppose you'd better come inside, both of you. You look like you've been dragged through a hedgerow backwards, and I refuse to have my granddaughter-in-law standing in the cold like a vagrant. Hadrian laughed, the sound rusty but genuine. Welcome home, he murmured against Marin's lips. Yes, she agreed, tears streaming down her face. Home. The wedding at Dunmore Hall was nothing like the first one. No cold stone church with 7 reluctant witnesses, no vows spoken like contract terms, no groom who couldn't meet his bride's eyes. This time, the chapel overflowed with flowers. This time, Marin wore a gown of ivory silk that Linnea had helped her choose, simple and elegant, and nothing like the borrowed gray she had worn before. This time, Hadrian waited at the altar with an expression of such naked hope that it made her weep before she was halfway down the aisle. "We're already married," she had pointed out when he first proposed the ceremony. "This seems excessive." "The first wedding was for duty," he had replied, taking her hands. "This one is for us." And so they stood before the same priest who had married them in haste and spoke their vows again, this time meaning every word. "I, Hadrian Vance, take you, Marin, as my wife, not because of promises to the dead, but because of promises to the living. I vow to love you without fear, to trust you without reservation, to build a life with you that honors the past without being imprisoned by it. I, Marin Vance, take you, Hadrian, as my husband, not because I had nowhere else to go, but because there is nowhere else I want to be. I vow to fight for us when it would be easier to run, to stay when it would be simpler, to leave, to remind you every day that you are worthy of love." When he kissed her, the small chapel erupted in applause. The celebration that followed lasted well into the night. Sir Marcus Thorne gave a toast that made everyone laugh and Hadrian blush. Linnea danced with every eligible man in attendance and several ineligible ones. Corwin got thoroughly drunk and attempted to serenade the dowager, who looked both horrified and secretly pleased. Even Marin's mother attended, sitting quietly in a place of honor, watching her daughter with tears in her eyes. Late in the evening, when the guests had finally departed and the candles were burning low, Marin found herself alone with Hadrian on the terrace where they had first confessed their love. The winter stars blazed overhead, just as they had that night, but everything else had changed. "I have something for you," Hadrian said. He reached into his coat and withdrew a folded paper, worn at the edges. "I should have given you this months ago, but I wasn't ready to let it go." Marin took the paper with trembling hands. She recognized the handwriting immediately. Tobias. This letter was different from the one she had found in Hadrian's study, shorter, more personal, and addressed to her. "Marin, if you're reading this, then Hadrian has done what I asked. He's protected you, and knowing him, he's probably also fallen in love with you, because that stubborn fool can't help caring about everyone he's supposed to keep at a distance. Don't let him push you away. He will try. He always does. But underneath all that duty and control, there's a man who desperately wants to be happy and doesn't believe he deserves it. Show him he's wrong. I love you, little sister. I always did. I'm sorry I couldn't be there to tell you in person." Tobias. The tears came freely now. Marin pressed the letter to her heart, overcome. "He wrote it the same night as the one he addressed to me," Hadrian said quietly. "He gave them both to a messenger, with instructions to deliver them if he didn't return. The messenger found me weeks later, still recovering from my wounds. I kept yours because—" He hesitated. "Because I wasn't sure I would ever see you. Because I didn't know if I could bear to deliver it. Because holding on to it felt like holding on to him. Thank you," Marin whispered, "for keeping it safe, for giving it to me now." He knew. Hadrian moved closer, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Somehow, before I even met you, he knew this would happen. He knew you better than you know yourself. He knew us both. They stood together in the starlight, wrapped in each other, and in the blessing of a brother who had loved them enough to plan for their happiness, even from beyond the grave. "I want to be the person he believed I could be," Hadrian said finally. "The kind of man who deserves this. Who deserves you. You already are." Marin turned in his arms, reaching up to touch his face. "You just needed someone stubborn enough to remind you." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, and the corner of her mouth. "Stay with me forever." "I thought we agreed. No more escape routes." This isn't an escape route. This is a request." His eyes held hers, gray and warm, and full of a love she had never expected to find. "Grow old with me. Build something with me. Help me become the man Tobias knew I could be." Maren smiled through her tears. "Yes," she said. "To all of it. Forever." The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to human joy and sorrow, as they had for millennia. But here on this terrace, in this moment, the universe seemed to contract to just the two of them, holding each other against the cold, building warmth from nothing but love. 3 years later, the library at Dunmore Hall had changed. Where once it had been a shrine to solitude and grief, it now bore the evidence of life lived fully. A basket of mending sat beside Maren's favorite chair. Linnea's embroidery, still disastrous, decorated a footstool. Wooden blocks lay scattered beside a stuffed rabbit in the corner, waiting for the toddler who would wake demanding attention. And on the mantelpiece, beside the Ashworth family crest, sat 2 letters in simple frames. The first, from Tobias to Hadrian. "Don't let my death convince you otherwise." The second, from Tobias to Maren. "Show him he's wrong." Hadrian found her there in the late afternoon, curled in her chair with a book she wasn't reading, her hand resting on the swell of her belly where their second child grew. "You're supposed to be resting," he said. "I am resting." "You're plotting something, I can tell by the look on your face." "I am not." He crossed to her chair, leaning down to kiss her. "Liar. You have the same expression Linnea gets before she does something that will require me to apologize to someone." Maren laughed, reaching up to brush the silver threads that had begun to appear at his temples. 3 years of happiness had softened him, eased the rigid lines of his face, brought light back to eyes that had once held only shadows. "I was just thinking," she said, "about how close we came to missing this. We didn't miss it. Because you wouldn't let me go. Because you came back." He settled into the chair across from her, the same chair where they had sat that first night, when everything between them was still uncertainty and negotiation. "You're the one who fought for us, Maren. I just held on and refused to let go." Their son's voice drifted from upstairs, high and demanding, followed by Linnea's answering laugh. The house that had once felt like a mausoleum now rang with noise and chaos and the unmistakable sounds of family. "Tobias would have loved this," Maren said softly. "He would have spoiled the children terribly and taught them all his worst habits." Hadrian's smile was bittersweet. But yes, he would have loved it. Outside the library windows, spring was arriving at Dunmore Hall. The gardens bloomed with the flowers his mother had planted. New growth pushed through soil that had seemed dormant forever. And inside, in the library where their story had truly begun, the Duke who had married for duty held the wife who had taught him to live for love. "Thank you," Hadrian said quietly. "For what?" "For falling asleep on a stranger's shoulder at the opera." Maren blinked. "I never did that." "I know. But someone must have. Somewhere, some woman made a mistake that changed a stranger's life. And I like to think we're the version of that story that ends well." He took her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "Our beginning was different, but the ending is the same." "And what ending is that?" He smiled, the full, unguarded smile that still made her heart skip. "The one where we choose each other. Every day. Forever." Maren leaned forward and kissed him. Outside, spring continued its slow transformation. Inside, love did the same. And in the frames on the mantelpiece, Tobias Calloway's letters kept their silent watch, bearing witness to the happiness he had known they would find.